Through his observation, Han Li was able to make some new discoveries. All of these balls of light contained different images, depicting a vast array of different settings and beings. Furthermore, these balls of light varied drastically in size, and it was clear that their sizes had to have something to do with the scenes depicted within them. All of a sudden, Han Li raised an eyebrow as he cast his gaze toward a giant ball of light that was flowing toward him. This ball of light depicted a black desert with a series of shadows flashing incessantly through it. It seemed that there were many people locked in a fierce battle there, and just now, a dark purple projection with 3 heads and 6 arms had flashed past. Isn't that the cultivation art used by Shi Chuankong? The giant ball of light passed by in front of Han Li without pause, and he decided to release a wisp of spiritual sense toward it. As soon as his spiritual sense made contact with the ball of light, the latter immediately released a burst of suction force that sucked in Han Li's soul. Some time later, he began to slowly recover his consciousness, and the deafening sounds of a ferocious battle rang out all around him, while the surrounding space trembled violently. Han Li opened his eyes ever so slightly to inspect his surroundings, and sure enough, he was situated on the black desert that he had witnessed through the ball of light. High up in the sky were thick black clouds that were extremely dense, resembling enormous chunks of lead that struck the beholder with a sense of foreboding. Thick bolts of dark purple lightning were flashing through the clouds, and 2 groups of cultivators were locked in an intense battle beneath the clouds. One side consisted mostly of humanoid cultivators clad in suits of purple armor, but there were also some among them who had strange appendages like beastly heads, wings, or long tails. All of them were giving off fierce devilish chi, and they were clearly all devilish beings. There were at least 200 to 300,000 of these devilish cultivators, and the majority of them were at the spatial tempering and body integration stages. There were also many true immortals and golden immortals among them, and they were led by over 10 jade immortals, all of whom were standing at the forefront of the devilish army with blinding purple light radiating from their bodies. One of them had summoned a purple projection with 3 heads and 6 arms behind them, and that was most likely what Han Li had spotted just now. This was clearly a battle of an enormous scale, and Han Li cast his gaze toward the opposing side to discover that all of them were clad in suits of golden armor. And they weren't outnumbered by the devilish army in the slightest. Even though these suits of golden armor were somewhat different from the ones worn by immortal envoys, it was clear that these cultivators belonged to the Heavenly Court. The Heavenly Court army wasn't inferior to the devilish army at all, and they were also led by over 10 Jade Immortals who were locked in battle against the devilish Jade Immortals. In the air behind the Heavenly Court army was an enormous golden vortex that was several dozen kilometers in size, and at its center was a giant pathway that was around half a kilometer wide. The vortex was releasing formidable spatial fluctuations, indicating that it was a spatial passageway, and more cultivators clad in suits of golden armor were constantly pouring out of the vortex to join the Heavenly Court army. The 2 armies continued to clash as lights of different colors erupted forth in all directions amid earth-shattering booms, and the battle between the high zenith cultivators was particularly terrifying. The ground was already riddled with enormous trenches and craters with crimson lava bubbling beneath them, and countless spatial rifts were constantly being torn open, as if this very space itself were unable to withstand the intensity of the battle. This is a battle between the devil race and the Heavenly Court. At this moment, he had taken over the body of a deceased devilish warrior, wearing a suit of lavish purple armor. He appeared to have possessed quite a lofty cultivation base, and he had perished from a hole that had been pierced through his lower abdomen. All of a sudden, a thunderous roar of fury rang out from beneath the ground. A massive bulge rapidly appeared on the ground in front of the devilish army before exploding, and an enormous figure slowly emerged from beneath the earth. Han Li turned his gaze to that direction, and he couldn't help but draw a sharp breath at what he saw. The giant figure was a rotund creature that was just barely humanoid in form. It had a pair of thin and long eyes, a flat nose, and a cavernous mouth that was filled with yellowish-black sharp fangs with viscous drool flowing out incessantly, presenting a disgusting sight to behold. The creature was extremely tall, close to 100,000 feet in stature, and it had a bulging belly. Its skin was a withered yellow color that resembled coarse rock, and its body was covered in molten lava, but it appeared to be completely unbothered as it walked along while dragging an enormous club behind it. A terrifying aura that wasn't inferior to any of the high zenith cultivators in the sky was emanating from the creature's body, and it let loose an earth-shattering roar, causing the nearby space to tremble violently. Immediately thereafter, it began to lurch forward with extremely heavy footsteps that caused the entire earth to tremble, and it charged at the Heavenly Court army, creating such violent tremors that some of the nearer Heavenly Court cultivators were unable to remain on their feet. What is that thing? In the next instant, the ground began to tremble violently once again, and more of those massive bulges appeared in front of the devilish army, following which a collection of 20 to 30 of those massive creatures emerged from the earth, before charging at the Heavenly Court army with their clubs held aloft. In the face of these enormous clubs, the Heavenly Court cultivators were crushed like insects, and the front of the army immediately began to collapse. However, right at this moment, the sound of a loud horn rang out from within the Heavenly Court army, and all of the Heavenly Court cultivators immediately began to retreat, while several hundred silver giants emerged. These silver giants were each close to 10,000 feet tall, with spiky silver hair that resembled steel needles on their heads. Furthermore, there were huge silver wings that were flashing with silver lightning on their backs. In the left hand of each giant was a short silver awl, while in the right was a massive silver hammer, both of which were giving off astonishing lightning auras. In the face of the small army of mountainous creatures, the silver giants remained completely expressionless, and they immediately raised their hands to aim their awls at the opposing creatures. Immediately thereafter, they raised their hammers before striking them heavily against the back ends of their awls, and bursts of rumbling thunder rang out as several hundred incredibly thick bolts of silver lightning erupted out of their hands before striking the rotund creatures like a volley of giant silver lightning spears. Tremendous lightning law power fluctuations surged out of the silver lightning, causing the black lightning in the dark cloud up above to churn violently. The rotund creatures were rather alarmed by this sudden assault, and they roared as they swung their clubs through the air, conjuring up countless club projections to defend themselves. However, the club projections stood no chance against the silver lightning, and the latter was able to blast a series of huge holes into the seemingly indestructible bodies of the giant creatures. In the blink of an eye, most of the giants exploded into countless scraps of flesh, and the few that survived had also suffered severe injuries. However, the silver lightning on the bodies of the silver giants had also completely faded, and they were all looking quite weary. At the same time, their lightning hammers and awls had also become completely dull and devoid of luster. Some of them had even begun to crack, and they seemed to be disposable treasures. Right at this moment, the dark clouds above the silver giants suddenly began to churn violently, and all of the black lightning within a radius of hundreds of kilometers converged to form a massive black lightning hand that was several dozen acres in size before swooping down upon the silver giants. The giant black hand was giving off a terrifying aura that threatened to crush the entire space beneath it. But right at this moment, a ball of golden fire suddenly appeared above the silver giants. It was a fiery golden figure that was entirely enshrouded in golden flames, and as soon as they appeared, they immediately reached up with one hand before making a grabbing motion. A resounding boom instantly rang out as a giant draconic claw formed by golden flames took shape, then clashed against the massive lightning hand with tremendous force. The giant lightning hand was instantly stopped cold in its tracks. "You thought you could fool me with your little tricks, Limosi? Even a child would have been able to plainly see that you were using those titanic devils to lure out by Lightning God Brigade," the fiery golden figure sneered. "Is that so? A cold voice rang out from the black clouds up above, and right at this moment, one of the giant creatures that was on the verge of death opened its mouth to release a ball of radiant crimson light, which sped over to the silver giants in a flash, before revealing itself to be a fist-sized crimson ball. The ball was riddled with what appeared to be a system of blood vessels, and it was pulsating incessantly like a living creature. An alarmed look instantly appeared on the face of the fiery golden figure upon seeing this, and they immediately attempted to flee, but the voice within the dark clouds up above rang out once again. "You're not getting away that easily." The giant lightning hand began to glow brightly as it forced the opposing fiery draconic claw downward, and at the same time, one of the lightning hand's fingers twitched ever so slightly. 2 thick bolts of black lightning instantly sprang out of the tip of the finger, appearing in the path of the fiery golden figure in a flash, before slicing toward him like the blades of a pair of giant lightning scissors.